I'd like to get started and welcome everyone to this webinar hosted by McDermott and Bull and Profit Recovery Partners. As many of you know, PRP launched a quarterly webinar series in December of 2017. Since then, we've covered a number of topics, including artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and process improvement. This is the fourth webinar in the series, and this quarter we're covering a topic very near and dear to my heart, which is diversity and inclusion. Specifically, how do we recruit, retain, and engage a diverse workforce? Our plan today is to go through a number of topics provided on the screen. We'll cover the introductions of our captivating speaker panel, discuss recent developments in the media, including Me Too and recent legislative updates, as well as specific initiatives out of the legal and healthcare industries to attract a diverse applicant pool. We'll talk a little bit on how to best define and measure the impact of various diversity initiatives and speak to the growing role of technology and diversity programs. Last, we'll wrap things up with diversity trends in the staffing industry and make sure to leave a little time to answer any questions you might have as attendees. So before we get started, I'd like to kick this off by sharing a little bit about me. My name's Chintawat, and I'm super excited to be your moderator for today's session. I'm the VP of HR at Profit Recovery Partners. For those of you who don't know, PRP is the largest consulting firm in North America focused on reducing general and administrative expenses. I'm passionate about this topic for a couple different reasons. First, I'm a mixed-race female who's experienced the struggle of feeling like I don't belong at an organization, which has really fueled a drive to launch diversity and inclusion programs so that others don't have the same experience. Also, as an HR leader, I feel a sense of personal responsibility to find ways we can increase diversity representation in industries which are currently underrepresented, some of which will be covered today, including the legal industry, the healthcare sector, and professional consulting services, including PRP. And I'm super excited at the opportunity to do this at PRP, where I've been fortunate to be a part of the executive team for the past 60 days. Prior to Profit Recovery Partners, I've had a number of leadership positions in both the technology and financial services sector. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our goal in selecting and organizing the speakers for today's session was to provide a purposeful, curated perspective on this topic from varied backgrounds. So without further ado, I'd like to share with you our speakers today. First, we have Sonia Menon, Chief Operating Officer of Neal, Gerber, Eisenberg. Sonia has graciously agreed to provide her C-level point of view of a major player in the legal industry. We also have Denise Banuelos, the Manager of Diversity and Inclusion at City of Hope. Denise has over 25 years of rich experience in the diversity and inclusion space. Last, we have Soliz, the Senior Recruitment and Sales Manager at Aston. We thought it would be extremely insightful to have Lisa's perspective, not only as someone who is active in diversity and inclusion initiatives in her own organization, but also as someone who interfaces with managers' hiring strategy on a daily basis. We are so fortunate to have such a distinguished group of ladies sharing their perspectives with us today. I'd like to take a moment to provide a little more on each of their backgrounds, starting with Sonia.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. My name is Sonia Menon, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Neal, Gerber, and Eisenberg, and we're a law firm based in Chicago. We have about 150 lawyers at our firm and a similar number of staff. I've been with the firm for over 17 years now, and I'm responsible for overseeing and running the operations of the firm, and also working with the firm's leadership on strategic direction and the strategic agenda of the firm. I helped institute the firm's diversity committee over 15 years ago, and have been an active member and proponent of being innovative and making change to the way we do things as we understand how it impacts women, minorities, and LGBTQ+ attorneys in our recruiting, retention, and advancement efforts. Like Sarah, I'm personally passionate about making a difference here because while I grew up in a different country, I grew up in England, my family is originally from India, and so I've spent thirds of my life in 3 different continents and therefore 3 different cultures. I know firsthand what it feels like to have to constantly adapt and adjust, and I also know the feeling of not fitting in. In the legal space, we continue to help our firm and other organizations understand what they can do better. And I also try to help underrepresented groups develop skills to help themselves to be more successful and happy. I have to say I'm thrilled to be invited to join this panel because I believe it's a very important and relevant topic today. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia, and welcome. Denise, you're next up. Can you share a little bit of your background with the audience?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Denise Banuelos. I'm a manager in the Diversity and Inclusion Department at City of Hope, which is a comprehensive cancer research hospital located in Duarte, California. I've been working at City of Hope for almost 4 years now, at a time when the Diversity and Inclusion Program was still being developed. I support 9 employee resource groups, a Diversity and Inclusion Council, and lead the expansion of our new Diversity and Inclusion Strategy, which is driven by 4 diversity task force groups. I have an extensive background in equal opportunity and diversity and inclusion, as Sarah stated, and very passionate about this topic, and look forward to sharing some of our progress at City of Hope in today's webinar. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Denise. We're eager to hear your perspective on the topic today. Our third speaker is Lisa Soliz. Lisa, can you take a moment to further introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lisa Soliz, and I am with Aston Carter. We are a recruitment firm here in Orange County, California. We're also on a national basis as well. And I'm lucky enough to be out in the community and be able to meet with many different industries and different companies, and talk further with them about their diversity and inclusion programs, as well as their staffing needs. So I partner with different companies in terms of staffing and able to find people jobs all over Orange County within the accounting and finance skill sets. But I also am a member of our Diversity and Inclusion Board for the West Region, and have been on this board for about 6 years now, and actually created our Diversity and Inclusion team here locally in our Orange County office. That way I'm able to relay the message from our West Region and from our company nationally, down to each individual here in our office, and take that out to the community again. But I'm really happy to be here. I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion, and I appreciate PRP putting this together and allowing us to be a part of it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lisa. Next, a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, we wanted to let you know if you love this webinar and want to share it with everyone you know, you're going to be able to do so. In the next several days, you'll be able to download a recorded copy of this webinar at your discretion via the PRP website. We're also planning to post the recorded webinar via our LinkedIn page. Next, we wanted to let you know that you, as the audience, are a core part of our discussion today. We want to provide everyone an opportunity to ask questions on the topics. You can do this by clicking on the chat box at any time provided at the top of the screen. Please make sure when you submit, it goes to the Everyone dropdown in the chat box to ensure we can have access to all the questions submitted. Our plan is during the last 10 to 15 minutes of the discussion, we'll set aside time for our panelists to answer any questions that arise. Well, without further ado, let's open it up to the general discussion. I thought we should first spend a little bit of time talking about why we selected diversity and inclusion as our next webinar topic. The reason why is because we feel this is a topic that is both urgent and important for 3 reasons. The first is the future will be intersectional, meaning groups currently underrepresented are growing substantially in terms of both size and influence. The U.S. is projected to become a majority-minority country in the next 25 to 30 years. Meaning that ethnic and racial minorities will make up the majority of the U.S. population. This already happened in 2014 in California and will occur nationwide during our lifetime. Because of this, we have to consider how our unique influences and identities impact our experience as employees and as change agents. Next, we believe we have to drive change because the employee experience is currently not equal. Despite significant efforts from many organizations to create a fair and unbiased workplace, data shows that minorities defined across gender, race, and/or sexual orientation indicate significantly more negative and less inclusive experiences at work. This needs consistent, focused attention, investment, and education. We recognize that people stay at organizations when they feel they have a place where they belong. Last, we believe that diversity and inclusion are critical to driving business results. Incidentally, this happened to be the topic of my undergrad thesis, a statistical analysis of public organizations who focused on and invested in diversity. The data showed these organizations had consistently better business results in terms of revenue and profit. It is also important to understand the evolving definition of diversity is more than the traditional understanding of race, gender, etc. It's more about diversity of perspective and of thought and how this can grow and push an organization. We also see the opposite of this when there is a sustained effort to hold a particular group back. A notable example of this is the recent Me Too movement around female solidarity and empowerment in the workplace, which launched almost a year ago. Which brings us to our first question for the panel, which is around the impact of the Me Too movement. Ladies, the first question is your industry having a Me Too movement of its own? If so, how has the Me Too movement affected your efforts to engage and retain your employees? And along a similar vein, California recently enacted the Equal Pay Act effective January 1st of 2017. Are you seeing an additional momentum in this space as a result of this legislation?
Sarah, this is Sonia. I'll jump in. And I'll address both of your questions, both in terms of what we're seeing in the legal industry with the Me Too movement and where we've seen the impact with the equal opportunity. So I think the one significant shift that's very visible in the legal industry since the Me Too movement is the collective confidence in the sharing of voices. And all of the next couple of slides will just show you that. We've seen a few very public lawsuits at law firms related to sexual harassment per se. We've also seen what the legal industry is witnessing more of is lawsuits filed by women lawyers against their law firms on the grounds of gender discrimination in pay equity. There have been at least 4 high-profile lawsuits covered by the media this year alone, with women partners suing their law firms for pay inequity. We've also seen that firms who beef up their own anti-discrimination policies and increase the frequency of sexual harassment training are on a better ground. I think that setting clear pathways and guidelines for sexual harassment reporting is a very important part of it, and law firms who are ahead of the curve in these areas will certainly be distinguishing themselves, especially with the retention of diverse lawyers. And then on the recruiting front, this year we saw several media reports about prominent firms that require incoming associates and summer associates to sign employment agreements that contain mandatory arbitration and non-disclosure provisions that also cover sexual harassment claims in particular. The report caused a firestorm amongst law students, both in social media and also on law school campuses. And the students from a number of reputable law schools argued that firms with such agreements prioritize their reputation over their obligation to create a safe and non-discriminatory environment for their employees. They also believe that the agreements may disproportionately affect women and minorities. And finally, that the practice of these firms flies in the face of the Me Too movement. So to help students identify offending firms, a group of 50 law schools led by Yale Law School administered a survey to all these firms that recruit on their campuses. Some firms articulated their policies and practices, but many actually declined to respond. I will say that I was happy that our firm was able to respond to the survey and indicate that we do not require employees to sign a mandatory arbitration provision or a non-disclosure provision, and that our employment agreements contain no such provisions. I will also just premise this by saying that I understand why there might be an argument made by employers and law firms in particular to have arbitration agreements in place, but I personally don't see why you would subject that to interns who are coming in for a 12-week period as a law student. So we were happy to be able to respond to that. I also want to just talk briefly about something that's happened even more recently, and I think is difficult to ignore. All that's happened in the last week with the Senate hearings, while I don't want to get into a political discussion here about it, I think it's worth pointing out that a group of no less than 2,000 lawyers who happen to be mothers, including partners and associates from very big law firms across the country, joined together in a letter supporting Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. I just want to read a snippet of the letter. The group from which we are drawn prides itself on its diversity of race, geography, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, legal practice, and political affiliation, the letter states. Despite our differences, we share a few core attributes. We are women, we are members of the legal bar across the United States, and we are mothers. Above all, we support other women. In particular, we support women who take a stand to call out and fight injustice in many forms, including all manner of personal and professional abuse that targets or disproportionately affects women. So I think my point is what I started with, which is one of the biggest changes in the legal profession has been the collective power of voices of women. Doesn't matter which way you agree or disagree, but women feeling like they can come together, support each other, and that they do in fact have a voice as a result of the Me Too movement.
Thank you, Sonia. Such an intriguing perspective, especially in light of current events. Another one of which I'd like to share with the group, which was just signed into law in California this past Sunday, September 30th. This is remarkable in that all publicly traded companies in California will now be required to have at least one woman on their board of directors by the end of 2019. The minimum is 2 female directors if the company has 5 directors on its board, or 3 women if it has 7 directors by the close of 2021. Currently, a quarter of the 445 publicly traded companies in California do not have a single woman on their board. While this only incorporates one specific area of diversity, it will be engaging to watch how this develops. Will it spread to other states? Will California force inclusion in other areas of diversity as well? I guess we'll see. Denise, what are your thoughts on this particular question? What are you seeing specific to the Me Too movement in the healthcare industry?
Well, you know, Sarah, the healthcare industry isn't immune to sexual allegations, particularly with physicians that tend to be protected in fear that they will lose their rainmaker. When that lines up with a gender imbalance, such as the ratio of male to female doctors nationwide is about 2 to 1, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, women make up 80% of the healthcare workforce, but only 40% of the healthcare executive leadership. So it's important to keep potential abuses of power in check. In addition, bullying and other behaviors that foster a negative environment create more problems than any high earner is worth. Not only can it impact the hospital's bottom line with expensive lawsuits and bad press, it impacts retention and reputation. At City of Hope, we do not have a Me Too movement with a lot of allegations of sexual abuse, but a few of our nurses have responded or reported bullying behavior by the physicians when there is a difference of opinion with patient care.
Denise, for the bullying that you mentioned, are those gender-specific complaints?
Based on the complaints that we received, we have primarily received them from nurses making complaints from the male doctors. And we've empowered those nurses to speak up for themselves and their patients if they feel it's necessary.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to the next question, which has to deal with the impact to the labor market. The question is, the labor market has become increasingly tight over the last year. What has your organization been doing to make your company more attractive to applicants, especially with regard to diversity and inclusion? Lisa, let's go ahead and get started with you.
Yes, thank you. I would love to share, what our company has done over the past several years to attract more diverse applicants. Aston Carter is a division of Aerotech, and we've spent a lot of time towards branding our company to be culturally diverse and to ensure an inclusive environment. So one of the things that we've done is completely restructured our compensation package. That's just to attract higher talent in general. But in terms of D&I, we've changed our marketing collateral. It illustrates a culture of diversity and inclusiveness. And in terms of sales sheets and banners that we use, We've rebranded our website to illustrate diverse stories and diverse career paths for both internal and external employees. We have a social media page at Aerotech Careers. Works hard to depict the diverse workforce that we have in all of our offices. Our HR team is actually tasked with educating and holding our leadership accountable to matching the market that they sit in when it comes to hiring. We brand ourselves as a military-friendly employer, and myself, I actually hold job fairs at Camp Pendleton and partner with Working Wardrobes to try to attract, veteran candidates. We partner with national organizations such as BEA. We have diversity boards in each region. And we also have inclusive leadership training, which focuses on diversity and inclusiveness through leadership from any level.
Great insight. Thanks, Lisa. Sonia, what are you seeing relative to the legal industry?
So Sarah, while the legal industry has echoed much of what Lisa just shared with us in terms of inclusiveness training, especially for leadership, implicit bias training, diversity committees, and other affinity groups, partnering with women and minority organizations for recruiting and affinity purposes, putting together mentoring programs that take into account the diversity of the mentee. All of this has actually been in place for over a decade now. But what's been very frustrating for us and many other law firms is that at the end of the day, the needle has not moved enough. As you can see on the screen, we've put together a chart for the audience to see. It's based on the NALP study that was recently reported on diversity and released last year. And as you can see, comparing the numbers in 2010 with the numbers in 2017, progress has definitely been made. But unfortunately, the data tells us is that we're getting much better at recruiting minority and women attorneys out of law schools into our law firms. So many of our incoming classes literally have a 50-50 split between genders and also an improvement in minority representation. But what's disheartening is that we're still falling well behind at leadership levels. So while we have around 45% of our associates as women, the number is more than half when you come to attorneys who get promoted to partnership ranks. The same is true, unfortunately, for minority attorneys as well. What doesn't show up here on this chart, but is the biggest challenge that law firms face today is, on average, law firms only have 2.9% of their partners who are minority women. So that's double whammy, is the group that's least represented in positions of power and leadership at law firms, and is where law firms need to work the most. Clearly, law firms are doing better on the recruiting front, but I would say not so well on retaining our underrepresented groups. And one of the things that my firm has been focused on is the experience and development of the individual. We believe that having a more formal, structured system in the way of how assignments are divvied out and given out, managing that is critical, especially for women and minorities, because otherwise you have the halo effect where people tend to give assignments to people who they feel comfortable with, who are like them, and then women and minorities suffer. So for example, we have an assignment review system in place where we have assignment review partners who do just that. They really keep an eye on who's getting the assignments and why, which has been very helpful.
Makes sense. What are some other specific initiatives NGE is implementing to address this issue?
Sure. So we're constantly studying trends and learning from our employees as well as our applicants as to what they value in their jobs and in their workplace. We've recently made several changes to our policies and programs to address issues that are important to both applicants and our employees. And what I would say is, while some trends tend to be tied to millennial tendencies, I believe that most benefit other generations as well, and especially women. So for example, we've rolled out remote work policies for several groups of our employees. We've increased the scope as well as the length of our maternity leave. We're putting together a ramp off and a ramp on program for women going out on maternity leave to help them make a smoother transition both out when they go out on leave and also when they come back from leave. And we also allow for more flexibility when they return. We have a nursing mother suite to allow them to continue nursing when they come back. And then we offer backup childcare as well as elder care. We've also moved to what we call an anywhere workplace with our technology to provide more flexibility for our attorneys and staff to manage their work in their lives as well. We truly believe that talented individuals want to be valued at work, but they also want us to value their life outside of work, and we make it clear that we do. We've also increased our transparency and communication wherever possible. We could still do better on that, but I think we've improved it because research shows that often women and minorities in particular do not put themselves forward for leadership appointments because they simply underestimate their own eligibility. So for example, having published job descriptions for leadership roles and appointments provides increased transparency and structure and more easily allows interested parties to self-identify and to volunteer.
Wow, that's a pretty comprehensive list of programs. Thanks for sharing, Sonia. Denise, I would like to transition over to you at this time. What are some specific initiatives at City of Hope that are aimed to attract a more diverse applicant pool?
Well, what's unique about City of Hope is having FDA approval to develop drug therapies that can be used on patients immediately from bench to bedside. With that said, it's critical we attract the best researchers and postdocs to join our team. We particularly have had challenges attracting Hispanics and African American postdocs because the competition is so tight, they can basically go anywhere they choose. We realized that retention was the key to help solve this problem by developing a mentoring program that will assist the postdoc in setting them up for a trajectory of success at City of Hope.
Denise, can you talk a little bit more about the mentoring program that you mentioned? Have you seen a statistical increase in the retention of the Hispanic and African American postdocs as a result of the mentoring program?
No, we have not been able to measure that yet because, one, the program is still just getting started, but one of the reasons why we decided to focus on the retention is that we found that some of the postdocs were coming to City of Hope and leaving pretty quickly, so we wanted to target what was driving them out rather than staying for their year assigned to City of Hope, and realized that they felt that what was the feedback we were given back was that they didn't feel that they had anybody that looked like them or could mentor them through beyond what their research was, but just giving them some belief that there's going to be a future at City of Hope. So that was one reason for the approach. But this is something that is going to take a little while to be able to measure. And we're hoping that this approach will help keep them here and keep them at City of Hope. And when they do, that they will tell other postdocs about our program to encourage them to attend.
Good. Let's delve into this a little bit more with the transition to our next question, which is, how do you define success and measure impact for diversity and inclusion initiatives at your organization? What are some roadblocks you've encountered along the way? And can you provide additional detail on how City of Hope is measuring and defining success for their diversity and inclusion initiatives?
Well, City of Hope launched a new D&I strategy earlier this year that included an accountability structure. The strategy focuses on 4 quadrants and identified performance indicators to focus on for each quadrant, which consists of workforce representation, patient experience, preventive care, and enterprise leadership. The performance indicators were determined by a needs assessment taken by key stakeholders enterprise-wide. Task force groups were formed to establish and meet those metrics. For example, for our patient experience task force, the performance indicator will be focusing on patients as individuals and care provider preparedness through better communication to our patients and targeted education for our care providers. A dashboard was also created to report out quarterly to senior leadership on the progress of those goals. We've included the employee resource group leaders on the task force groups and require alignment of their activities to the task force goals. We'll know if we succeeded when we've reached 90% or higher on the next needs assessment for each quadrant.
Wow, thank you, Denise. I'd like to transition now back to Sonia and the specific commitment the legal industry has made around increasing diversity amongst employee promotion and advancement initiatives.
Thanks, Sarah. Sure. So the legal profession has witnessed the development of the Mansfield Rule, which you have up on your screen, to address challenges, particularly as it relates to the inequity of diversity in law firm leadership. It's based on the NFL Rooney Rule, the Mansfield Rule, which is named after Arabella Mansfield, who was the first woman admitted to practice law in the United States. It was actually a winning idea from the Diversity Lab's 2016 Women in Law Hackathon. And actually one of our partners, Leah Schleicher, participated in it, as did many law firm attorneys as well. This idea was further developed through the efforts of the Diversity Lab and focused on boosting diversity in law firms and also in law departments. You know, as Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, you cannot improve it. And the Mansfield Rule measures whether law firms have affirmatively considered women, attorneys of color, and or LGBTQ+ attorneys for promotions, for senior governance roles, and mid-level to senior level job openings. So for adherence of the rule, 30% of the candidate pool for open positions and significant leadership roles must come from one of these demographic groups. The Mansfield Rule is premised on the idea that broadening the pool of candidates actively considered for leadership roles will in fact increase diversity in those roles. Research shows that having a critical mass of diverse individuals in leadership considerations, in hiring considerations, and on key committees increases the eventual diversity in these areas. Also, research shows that the critical mass of diverse lawyers are more likely to lead to a top-down cultural shift that results in greater diversity across the entire organization. I have to say that I'm thrilled that we signed on to the Mansfield Rule 2.0, which started effective July of this year. So we have a year to certify, and it's a little early for me to comment on the impact at our firm, but I will say that we've been following this rule informally for a few years now, and we've already seen a shift in the composition of our firm leadership, leading to more diversity and also improved advancement for our diverse leaders. So just to outline what the criteria is that the Mansfield Rule measures to be certified, you're really looking at that 30% candidate pool for lateral partner recruiting, for lateral mid-senior level associate recruiting, for partner promotions only to equity partnership because some firms have a tiered structure, for partner promotion committees and nominating committees, for executive committees or board of directors, for compensation committees, practice group leaders who are heads of their groups, office heads if there are multiple offices, chairperson or managing partner depending on how you're structured. And then new this year, they've also added participation in formal pitches when you're pitching business to clients or potential clients, and also leadership job descriptions and appointment or election processes as well.
Thanks, Sonia. Both thought-provoking and progressive. I'm curious to see if and when this grows outside the legal sector. I have a follow-up question for you. It sounds like collection and maintenance of data across this area can be challenging as a part of this program. What kind of resources do you or other firms committed to the Mansfield 2.0 effort have to collaborate and support?
Sure. So just to give you some background, last year 41 firms participated and were certified this summer, so they had finished their year, which means they fulfill the requirements for the certification. And even more exciting, along with my firm, 64 other law firms signed up for Mansfield 2.0 this year, and we'll finish our certification in a year. One of the requirements of the certification process is that the participating firms must engage in community building and knowledge sharing with the participating firms, so with the other firms. As part of the Mansfield goal is to create and sustain a culture of knowledge sharing among firms so that we all make progress together as we work to dismantle barriers of diversity and inclusion goals. A large part of the knowledge sharing calls that we have is to share lessons learned, to share best practices, and also to take part in a Q&A. And the Diversity Lab that runs this has also set up an electronic resource library that is available to all registered firms. This is a central repository that, like I said, is held electronically, and it contains templates, tracking tools, best practices, and other kinds of resources and information that's extremely helpful for all the firms participating. I think the basis is that, you know, we don't all have to reinvent the wheel. We do much better when we share. And because it's really across the board, across the United States, having a kind of central electronic platform has been really helpful for us.
Thanks, Sonia. Fascinating how technology has a critical play in making this effort successful. Along similar lines, I'd like to transition and hear Denise's thoughts on the next question, which is related on what Sonia just covered in terms of technology and diversity. Denise, how do you see the role of technology and data in creating a more diverse and inclusive workplace?
Well, technology has broadened our way of bringing employees together through webinars, webcasts, and Skype that allow people to join from any location worldwide, which removes traditional barriers of not being able to physically be present in the room, and also be included in the discussion and facilitate greater employee inclusivity. Applications such as instant messaging speeds up the process of communication to questions or issues, regardless where the party is located. Technology can also assist with devices needed for disabled workers to allow them back in the workplace and be able to communicate with coworkers. And there are artificial intelligence applications available that assist with removing unconscious bias from the review of resumes because it's driven by data and taught to ignore traditional prejudices.
Follow-up question, are any of your organizations utilizing the AI applications that Denise mentioned to eliminate unconscious bias?
This is Lisa. We actually do. We use applicant tracking systems, and so we're able to do search strings based on word matching only. So it does provide a good advantage, to pulling up folks just based on their skill sets. But also sometimes you have to kind of be aware that the word matching, if the person hasn't written their resume with those specific words, it may not pull up that particular individual. So we try to come up with alternative solutions as well, or several different word matching strings to attract a wide array of candidates.
Sarah, this is Sonia. I would say that while firms have started trying to use, especially in the recruiting process, covering up the names of candidates where you could be biased by the name and whether it is a diverse candidate or not, I don't believe law firms, at least across the board, are using AI to help eliminate that unconscious bias. They do use AI for legal research efforts, and we do use technology to support people with disabilities, but AI hasn't yet helped with the kind of recruiting and bias elimination process.
Denise, is the AI application you mentioned, is that being used at City of Hope?
Not for recruitment, just through our Taleo applicant system as well. We use Taleo to help with the screening process. We also have we have a specialist on hand to assist employees with disability devices to assist them in interacting with their coworkers. But the use of the AI, we also use it for Skype. We have offices all over the nation, so we have taken advantage of that technology in that way. But the most seemingly interesting and intriguing is using it to assist in removing the unconscious bias. It can also show up in marketing in pictures that you choose for your advertising campaign. So there are various ways that can be implemented in the workplace. I think it's cutting edge and should be something to consider. There are some cautions with using that process because that also can fall into putting people into groups as well. But it's something to look forward to, I think, as a future tool for employers to consider.
Great. Thank you, ladies. I'm curious to see how technology trends will continue to impact diversity. Along these lines, Lisa, I'd like for you to cover our fifth and final question, which is, what kinds of trends and practices do you see amongst your clients from your vantage point in the staffing industry?
Companies, that I meet with, on a daily basis are very interested in creating stronger D&I programs. It just, helps promote higher performing teams. Many companies, in order to retain and engage, a diverse workforce, understand that they need to, to attract a wider array of candidates to to be highly successful. But in terms of strengthening their D&I boards and programs, some of the things that I've heard lately are creating subcategories within their D&I program, such as women's leadership groups, or if they do have leadership programs, making sure that they involve at least one female. Folks are sending out D&I representatives to seminars and symposiums to become more educated on diverse topics. One program that I attend quite often is the California Diversity Council, and they hold many, many seminars throughout the year. I've heard of one company providing a veteran wall to highlight veterans, honoring and educating various monthly diverse topics such as International Women's Day, LGBTQ Pride Month. Some folks were, hosting potlucks or lunch and learns, and then creating mentor programs. And it's really important. I think Denise had mentioned it previously, but those mentor programs are really important to make sure that you're matching folks of like backgrounds so they feel more comfortable and more welcomed and more engaged. And then providing training to managers about diversity and inclusion and or cultures to better connect with their employees and to better understand, what they're going through or just their background in general. Lots of folks are, representing their company at job fairs, so they'll send a diverse representation to host the job fair, and making sure that they're marketing to all demographics to attract diverse individuals. One company was partnering with diverse groups at colleges for their internship programs. Some are honoring and even sponsoring various state or national diverse groups, such as the National Society of Black Engineers, Women in Leadership. Again, holding, lunch and learns on various diverse topics, but doing so for folks to understand diverse career paths and just painting a bigger picture and teaching employees about the vision of the company in terms of diversity and inclusion, as well as performance, which will create buy-in and engagement. One company I thought was pretty interesting. They require panel interviews to have a diverse panel on every single interview. They partner with the talent acquisition team, and if they're not attracting a diverse candidate pool, then the talent acquisition team will extend and expand their job postings for recruitment. Just making sure you create a solidified onboarding program to ensure that every new hire receives the same experience and is welcomed. We actually do this, but we send out anonymous surveys to each employee to encourage feedback about improvements. And some folks go as far as, even tying in a raffle system to encourage participation. And the company that we use is Towers Watson, but there's many out there. Those are a lot of different things that I just planned and hosted a diversity and inclusion roundtable here in Orange County, and we had probably about 35 different clients come, and it was a great conversation, and we were sharing best practices about a lot of these different topics that I had just mentioned. So, feel free to take any of those ideas.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Lisa. Sonia, are you seeing similar or additional trends in the legal industry?
Sarah, we're definitely seeing some of the similar trends that Lisa mentioned, but one trend I thought was worth mentioning, and that's really picking up, and I think it's actually important in the recent hiring, is that of hiring chief diversity officers at law firms. To me, that signals two things. One is that the C-suite role now has a seat at the table to meaningfully affect change. And diversity and inclusion is no longer just relegated to a group of individuals who put forth new initiatives, new sponsorships each year, but rather it's being considered as an integral part of everything that a firm does, whether it's recruiting, mentoring, assignment systems, sponsorship programs, advancement. And so this person has their eye on the entire process of talent management, which I think is really helping, one, where law firms are going, but also helping leadership get on board with how important this is. So I think that's an important trend to watch.
Great, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to transition and begin to address some of the questions we've received. I'll read the question and then ask one of you ladies to answer. If another has additional color, you're welcome to contribute as well. The first question is, as Sarah mentioned, California recently passed a law that will impact all publicly traded companies and mandate women to have a position on the board. In your opinion, do you think other states will follow suit? Additionally, do you think this will lead to mandating a place for minorities? And finally, do you expect this to create a backlash? I'd like to ask Denise to begin the answer for this question.
I think that the more liberal states will follow first, just as they have with sexual harassment, aggressive sexual harassment laws and requirements. Some of the other states will be a little slower to come around, but I think it will start to pick up little by little over the year. In the UK, it's a requirement for the entire country that they have a diverse representation on their boards and have a certain number of women representation. So we are a little bit behind in the United States, and it's time to get going. I also believe that more education individually around different organizations around the importance of having women having a voice. They don't technically have a voice unless you have at least 3 or more. So the conversation needs to keep going, and I think that I'm glad that California took the first step in that.
Great, thank you.
Sarah, this is Sonia. I'll jump in as well. I agree with Denise that I think the more liberal states will follow suit more quickly than the other more conservative states maybe. One of the things that I really appreciate about the Mansfield rule is that I appreciate the question about the backlash, because I think that it's very difficult, just like all of the affirmative action backlash, in terms of mandating, though I think it's a great first step and exactly what Europe is doing. But I think what's nice about the Mansfield rule is that it's understanding the problem and saying, if you start looking at a more diverse pool of candidates for leadership roles, and also understanding what Denise said, which is 1/3 of the population is what makes a difference. If it's one person, it feels like a token. 2 doesn't move the needle enough. You have to have 3 out of 10, in general. I think that looking at the candidate pool and being aware that that's what you're trying to do will make a big difference. I just wanted to also share kind of a little story here. As we signed up for the Mansfield rule and there was some publicity around it, one of our clients reached out to us in a totally different industry. It's a private equity kind of banking space. And they asked if we would help them put some initiative like the Mansfield rule together for their space in the financial sector, so that they could think about either mandating or encouraging their boards to have more diversity. So I think it's something that people are starting to sit up and pay attention to, which is great.
Great, thank you, Sonia. Next question is specific to NGE, so I'd like for you to answer that as well. Have you also increased paternity leave or flexibility so that new mothers can return to work sooner if they wish to?
Yeah, so flexibility has been one of the key components of it, and we have increased paternity leave. In fact, what we are trying to do is really recognize, especially for same-sex couples, that if you're the primary caregiver, you should get the same amount of leave for bonding with your child as you would if you were just if you were a female. So really encouraging people, if they're the primary caregiver, to have the appropriate amount of leave to bond with their child. And especially if it's an adoption, or like I said, if it's a same-sex couple where that's not the person who's actually delivered the baby, we want to be able to give them more time off. And we have increased our paternity leave, but I will say this about not just our firm, but other firms as well. I think it's important not just to increase your leave time policies, but also create an environment where people feel like they can actually use the leave without any repercussions. And that's something that we're also working on. You know, there's always been traditionally this feeling like, if you're a man, what are you doing staying at home if your wife has had the baby? And really encouraging, especially our more senior attorneys, to understand how things have changed in the next generation. Men and women both want to be involved in bonding with and rearing their children. So that's been an important factor too to consider.
I'd like to add to that, Sarah.
Sure.
I completely agree with Sonia on that it's really important for, you know, the male to bond with their newborn child or adopted child. We've implemented in the past few years, well, our mothers have had an option to have an alternative work schedule. So coming in 4 days a week and working 1 day from home, you know, even after the maternity leave is completed. But it was only for mothers for such a long time, and you know, we realized that that's an issue, that's a problem, and so we offer that to our male employees as well, to have that alternative work schedule.
Great, thank you for sharing, Lisa. Super helpful. The next question is specific to the Mansfield rule. Sonia, have you found that clients are using the Mansfield rule as one criteria in selecting a firm?
Sarah, I'm not sure that I've heard that, but I will tell you this. I do know that some of the firms that have signed on for the Mansfield rule, at least in this past year, have done so because they have been very strongly encouraged by their existing clients to do so. I think that's a great motivator, but I've got to say, I think it's only going to be successful if you truly believe in what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you want to achieve that diversity in your leadership. So I think it's great for clients to push, but I think in the end, the change is only going to happen if the law firm, right from leadership top down, believes that this is something they want to do and want to make a change in.
Agreed. For our next question, I'd like to start with Lisa. The question is, can eliminating the candidate's name also work against diverse candidates? Some firms might want to specifically search for diverse names, which might be indicative of diverse experiences, culture, family, or points of view.
Yes, I mean, I would have to say that, you know, of course, that could definitely happen. We actually don't eliminate candidates' names, but you know, if you wanted to do that, then I think it would be just fine, because you know, the bottom line is you still need to attract the person that is, you know, the best person for the job. You know, of course, you want to promote diversity, and I truly believe in that. But you know, eliminating a person's name is definitely still going to allow you to attract the best person for the job, and that is the bottom line when it comes to hiring.
Sarah, this is Sonia. I just also want to add a piece on that, which is, you know, I would love for us to be at that point where we truly are genuinely looking for that diversity in the name to be able to highlight and hire those kind of people. Unfortunately, in the legal sphere, research even very recently conducted by a company called NextGen has shown the opposite to be true, which is recruiting folks, whether it's partners at law firms or the recruiters themselves, are negatively making decisions by reading names that sound more diverse. So for example, the studies that have been done is showing two sets of resumes where the details of the resume are exactly the same, but one resume, the name sounds a lot more ethnic than the other one, and people have a different reaction and a more positive reaction to the non-ethnic resume, even though all of the contents of it are the same. So I think we as a society are not there yet. But of course, as Lisa said, there's a potential of not being able to provide that information if you're genuinely looking for a diverse candidate.
Great. Thank you, Sonia. Ladies, at this point, I would like to wrap up the webinar. I'd like to sincerely thank everyone on the call for their participation, especially to Sonia, Denise, and Lisa for sharing their perspectives on this important topic, as well as to McDermott and Bull for their support and participation. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be posted on the website in the next several days, as well as on the PRP LinkedIn page. Take care, everyone.